room here. We'd love to know your name, your pronouns, where you're zooming in from today, and what native land you're on, and what organization you're representing. So feel free to go ahead and put those things into the chat. If you're not sure what native land you're on, we've included a number there that you can text and you can find out whose land you're on. We've got people joining us from over 25 different states across the US and about 7 different countries around the globe. So it's pretty exciting, and we love seeing the diversity of places that people are joining us from.
Awesome. Great. Do we want to get started? And hopefully folks will join us as we are rolling through the intro here. All right, awesome. Well, welcome. For those of you that are joining that are unfamiliar with the Vermont Education and Environment Network, we're hosting today's webinar, and we are a volunteer organization, and we are kind of run by a board of directors who you can see here from various organizations across the state of Vermont. And the Vermont Education and Environment Network was formerly known as Vermont SWEEP. Over the last year, our board of directors has been working to identify how we can best serve the community of educators and environmental professionals here in the state, reimagining our mission and doing a little rebranding. So our current mission is to act as a coalition of organizations and individuals promoting environmental education throughout Vermont. Our mission is to foster a network of individuals and organizations that are working together to promote high quality outdoor environmental and educational experiences. And we have one part-time staffer, Lindsay, and Lindsay is going to be our moderator for today's session. So I will turn it over, and Carrie is going to just touch base. We actually just released some pretty exciting information today from a survey that we conducted.
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie McAllister, along with Ashley Eaton, who you just heard from. We are co-chairs of the Vermont Education and Environment Network. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm zooming in from Vermont today here on Abenaki land. And as Ashley mentioned, we did a survey this fall, and we asked educators, both classroom and outdoor environmental and educational community partners, to help us understand what's going on as they respond to COVID in their teaching practices. So we've taken a look at what kinds of shifts have happened across Vermont in education, and also what kinds of support educators might need. So as you can see here from our infographics, and as you might expect, virtual teaching and learning is dominating the field for both formal and informal educators. And then on the next slide, you can see that we learned that all educators are seeking support around teaching online and teaching outdoors. And many classroom teachers have also said that outdoor clothing and gear were barriers to getting their students outside for outdoor learning. And that both informal and formal educators were interested in connecting with other educators to work on sharing ideas and learning in this time where everyone's kind of adapting their practices. So we used this survey and the results that we learned to guide our actions as a network this year. So we are providing these webinars to support professional learning around these different topics. And we're also currently holding a winter clothing drive for students, and also working to improve our website and our communications to promote connections between educators and to disseminate useful resources during this time. So I'm going to turn things over to our Vermont Education and Environment Network admin coordinator and our moderator for the panel today, Lindsay Whitaker.
Hi folks, my name is Lindsay Whitaker. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based here in Burlington, Vermont on Abenaki land. And like Carrie said, what we learned from our assessment of teachers is that a lot of teachers are needing gear and clothing for their students to feel prepared to be outside and learning in the winter. And we are, as a network, organizing a winter gear drive for folks within the state of Vermont to both donate and receive winter gear for students, whether their students are preschoolers or their students are high schoolers. So we've been working through restricted times with COVID, but still getting a lot of great donations that we look forward to distributing out to teachers who can then use with their students. You can also find a lot more of the work that we do across our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find us at Education VT. So, and I think we are going to get the links in the chat box for those. So you can follow us along there and see some of the other work that we're doing along with upcoming webinars. All right. So our webinar series is ongoing, and this is one of, let's see, we did a webinar starting in August. Is that right, Carrie and Ashley? August, September, October, and now November, teaching outdoors in winter. We've got a couple more coming up that we'll share about after our presenters and panelists share their wonderful knowledge. But this also came from our survey of educators and what are they needing? And folks told us loud and clear that they need resources in how to teach outdoors and how to keep their learners comfortable. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's webinar. Zoom etiquette today. We hope that you'll use the chat box to show your interest and excitement, but understand that it can certainly be distracting as well every time that notification pops up to say that someone else added a comment. So just be courteous and respectful with excessive chatting, and know that that can be quite a distraction. But we certainly welcome your excited and relevant comments. We do have a Q&A box in today's webinar that we would like for you all to put all of your actual questions in. The chat can get a little busy, and we know that questions can get lost in the chat. So we will be moderating the Q&A box for your questions for our panelists. And we've got several to get things going, but after we ask the panelists questions, we'll be looking through the Q&A box, Carrie, Ashley, and I, for those for the questions that you all have. And we are utilizing the upvote feature today. So if someone is asking a question that you also have, please press the upvote or the thumbs up button so that we know what are the most relevant questions that our audience really wants answered. And we'll do some work in mining those and asking our panelists towards the end. All right. So today's panelists are all Vermont folks or who have experience working in Vermont. We have Ross Doré from Crow's Path. Give us a wave, Ross. Excellent. We have Zeddy Weaver from the Chill Foundation. Hello, Zeddy. Zach Coda from North Branch Nature Center. Mary Corcoran from Arrowhead Forest Farm. And Matt Schlein from Willowwell Foundation. All right, and we are so glad to have you all here today. So for our panelists, please introduce yourselves and your organization and provide a brief overview of your outdoor teaching program or classroom. And I'd love to start with Mary.
Hi, my name's Mary Corcoran. I use she, her pronouns, and my organization is Arrowhead Forest Farm. We are a forest preschool located in Milton, Vermont, and our mission is to spread love and compassion through outdoor education. We work on 5.5 acres in Milton.
Great, and Mary, what's the audience that you work with?
Ages 3 to 6.
Great, thank you. All right, how about Matt?
Hit the unmute there. Hi, I'm with the Willowwell Foundation. We do a place-based program from pre-K through college level. We run a Wren's Nest Forest Preschool down at Treleaven Farm in New Haven. We also have our primary campus is a 230-acre tract of land in Moncton, Vermont, where we offer a variety of programs, including camps. We've started this year in response to COVID, a program called the New Roots Project for students aged 5 to 15. And our signature program is the Walden Project, which is a public school program run in conjunction with Virgins Union High School, and we're on our 21st year. And students, rather than meeting in a classroom, meet out around a fire throughout the 4 seasons, and it's inspired by Thoreau's sojourn out to the woods.
Thanks, Matt. Zeddy, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, yeah, I'm Zeddy Weber, Director of Programs for the Chill Foundation. I currently am based in Vermont. However, Chill runs programs in 16 different cities throughout the US and Canada. Our mission is to inspire youth to overcome challenges through board sports. So we run programs year-round focused on snowboarding, skateboarding, surfing, stand-up paddleboarding through the lens of a youth development curriculum. And we work with youth ages 10 to 18.
Great, thanks, Zeddy. Zach, why don't you go next?
Ninth generation Vermonter who was lucky enough to grow up on a small dairy farm in rural Vermont. And I have the pleasure of being a teacher naturalist at North Branch Nature Center in Montpelier. Our mission at North Branch is connecting people with the natural world, which we do through a whole array of programming, which for today's purposes includes 3 main programs, ECO, which is educating children outdoors, in which our teacher naturalists partner with classroom educators and actually take those classes out into the forest on a weekly basis. Our forest preschool, and then after school programs, which are for a couple cohorts of school age youth.
Thanks, Zach. And Ross.
Hi, I'm the Youth Programs Director of Crow's Path. Our primary program is the Field School, which runs parallel to the school year. We have kids age 7 to 14 all together in one program, and we're in the forest from 9 to 3, and we do just a ton of experiential learning in all of the elements, and we run summer programs as well.
All right, so that's a brief introduction of our panelists. And all right, starting with Mary again, how do you keep learners safe, comfortable, and engaged for outdoor learning in winter? And for those of you who don't know Vermont's climate, we do have long and harsh winters, and we can get a lot of snow. And so Mary, in particular, you work with quite a young audience, 3 to 6 year olds. And so how do you keep that audience in particular comfortable and engaged for outdoor learning in winter?
I think part of it definitely has to do with proper clothing, like having a base layer, fleece layer, snowsuits is really important, and mittens and hats. We also are able to do fires a lot. So when they're sitting down and eating snack or having lunch, that's a time when they usually get really cold. So we make fires, and that definitely helps a lot. But also just, I think, teaching them to keep moving when they are feeling chilly is really important. The other day, we had to stop eating lunch, chew our food, and then run around and play tag for a few minutes just to get warmed back up. And I think once they have that skill of learning that they're cold, and instead of sitting and being chilly, they start moving, and that has made a huge difference for us too. My age group as well, sometimes we do have to come inside, it's just too cold out. So I think like knowing the balance where if they're really uncomfortable, making sure that we're taking care of them in that way too.
Great, thanks for that. Yes, indoors I think is a great resource for outdoors and utilizing that when necessary. Zeddy, you've got an audience that is often moving outside through board sports, is that right? And how do you keep them comfortable and engaged in outdoor learning in winter?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the same things that Mary mentioned. We provide outerwear for all of our participants to just ensure that they have what they need to be warm and comfortable. Also, just in terms of kind of like front loading the experience, really, sharing what to expect, how to communicate if you're not comfortable, if you're feeling cold. We often have youth who maybe haven't been outdoors in that kind of climate for an extended period of time. And so making sure that they are letting us know and communicating early if they're getting really cold versus waiting until it's kind of like at that danger zone. Access to water and food, really important, and taking breaks and ensuring that there's time and space to properly refuel and hydrate. And yeah, access to indoor space. Absolutely. Yeah, you know, making sure folks know where they can go, who they can go with to take a break, to warm up. And staying active, of course, like keep them moving. Yeah.
Great. Those are awesome tips, Zeddy. Thank you. Zach, you and I, before the webinar was starting, you were talking about gear and access to gear. Would you touch on that a little bit?
The things, because we at North Branch Nature Center work with many different schools, as we've noticed, there's some stark socioeconomic disparities, sometimes with even within the same classroom. And so not everyone has access to gear to make them comfortable and safe learning outdoors. So we've worked with some of our schools that we partner with to secure grant funding that the school can use to purchase clothing. So some schools have clothing that they lend. Lending programs can work really well for families, or to secure funding that can be a pass-through, that can be turned back over to families to buy gear directly. And then another option is to reach out to companies that manufacture good winter gear, because many organizations, many of these businesses have programs where they'll offer pretty good discounts or even donate gear to schools and programs.
Great, thanks. Matt or Ross, either of you jump in for what you all do.
Sure. We do a lot of cooking around the fire is a nice thing, and the calories. We have a really sweet 1 acre garden, and we put up food, and then winter stews are a great way of kind of keeping folks warm. Cotton, we are violently opposed to cotton. That has a tendency to just, like, it gets wet, it just leaches the heat right out of your body. I think the tips that everyone's been saying about hydrating and eating is super important. Another thing is actually making sure that people go to the bathroom regularly, because your body will keep your urine warm, and if you've got an empty bladder, then that will go and warm up the rest of your body. So it's a real practical, grounded thing, but it's super important. Also, if you're sitting for any period of time, so your butt is not on the ground. Crazy Creeks are fantastic, or putting your feet up on a log versus the cold ground can also help. And then just to piggyback on what Zach was saying in terms of access to resources, parent groups can be really fantastic in terms of helping kids make sure that they're there, that they can be outdoors safely and comfortably.
Great, thanks, Matt. And Ross, share a few tips that you've got.
Yeah, so I kind of break it down into two things. There's the structure of the day, which is going to involve movement, fires, getting out of the wind, if possible, and then mentally preparing kids, which in our program has gone a long way. We do not have access to any indoor space, so we're out there all day. And that is about explaining to kids how our body's thermostat works. Our hands and feet are going to be cold if our core is not fully warm and if our head is not fully warm. And so we do role playing, explain the biology of it, because so often you get a kid whose hands are freezing cold and their feet are freezing cold, and you say, put on this extra jacket, put on this extra hat, and they refuse the extra gear because they want something to put on their hands or feet. But if we explain to them when they're comfortable, while they're warm, that you have to have a warm core and a warm head and a warm neck to have extra warmth to send to your hands and feet, kids will understand it. And then when they're cold and I offer them a scarf, they'll take it. And if I could only have one type of extra gear, it would be scarves and neck warmers. Even with our kids who do have access to incredible snow gear, just having an unzipped jacket and all of this exposure here just lets out so much warmth because all that blood is going to the head. So teaching kids about that, modeling wearing that type of gear just changes a lot for the kids. So we just want to empower them to diagnose, to recognize that they're cold, to be able to speak that they're cold, and then to come up with a solution that we've talked about ahead of time. So running, getting warm gear on their body, or eating or drinking warm food as well.
Great. Yeah, that reminds me of what Zeddy was saying about front loading the experience and really letting folks know how to take care of themselves when they do get cold. Zach, I see you've got something to add.
Yeah, Matthew brought up a really good point that I would love to build on about the biology, and I'll preface this by saying that I'm kind of a biology nerd and have a background in healthcare as an advanced EMT. So I think it's important to just consider the differences in kids' bodies and why it puts them at a little bit greater risk in the cold than adult bodies. They have a much greater body surface area than adults, so they lose heat a lot quicker. So they need even more layers than adults do. Kids also have a much higher ratio of fat to muscle. So while that extra fat might insulate them sort of at marginal temperatures, when it gets really cold, it doesn't help, and they don't have the muscle that adults do to generate extra heat. So the colder it is, the more calories they have to eat. And I've seen it can be really hard to get kids to eat outside because oftentimes it involves taking gloves and mittens off. So one of the recommendations I have for families, I see a lot of snacks that are like bars, like Cliff Bars or Luna Bars, which are great. Those tend to be pretty calorie dense, but they're hard to open up. So I suggest parents just take a pair of scissors, and when they're packing the snack, cut a bigger slit into them so kids can just pull them apart without having to take their mittens off. Like that's a really ace trick right there. And like Matt was saying, with the bladder capacity, that's really important that they have bathroom breaks because they are losing heat, keeping their full bladder warm. But if they are incontinent, that's really dangerous because as soon as you're wet outside, that's when dangerous situations happen. And just that kids are less aware of their bodies in general. And if they're distracted by play or really engaged in play, they might not pick up on the fact that they're getting cold or need an extra layer. So I try and do regular self-checks. Just stopping and prompting kids to assess how they're feeling is really important.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love that snack trick. I'm absolutely going to do that for my upcoming winter adventures. And I love bringing up the bladder piece with kids because doesn't every kid love potty humor? And we know it. Ross, something to add there.
Yeah, thanks for that snack tip. Definitely going to use that. Just going back to teaching kids how to dress appropriately, especially when you're going to be working with kids over the course of the winter and you're going to see them again. Everybody knows about wearing layers. And for a lot of kids, that means t-shirt, sweatshirt, shell, which when it's 15 degrees out, isn't gonna make it through a 7-hour day. So we sort of playfully, with our instructors, we often do layer contests. So if you're wearing one layer, stand up, and then you go to your second layer. And so basically, whoever's wearing the most layers is the last person standing. And so the kids can see that the instructors are often wearing 7, 8, 9 layers just on their upper body alone. And their minds are blown because they thought t-shirt, sweatshirt, jacket was what we were talking about. And so just being able to trap in all that warmth and finding ways to demonstrate and model it is really helpful. And kids will come up to you the next morning and be like, I'm wearing 8 layers. I didn't know I had 8 shirts. And getting them excited about it and making it fun.
That's certainly a great tip for a repeat audience. Thanks. All right. So our next question for our panelists, how have your programs changed to incorporate COVID incorporate COVID guidelines this year? And then I'm going to add a little bit of a question that I've seen in the Q&A, especially if any of you have had to move to virtual programming. What I know a teacher is interested in knowing that they might have to be moving to a virtual space due to COVID. So are there activities that you might suggest to those teachers, and or what have you had to do to change for COVID and have positive things come out of that? Mary, we will start with you, if that's all right.
I think we lost Mary.
Oh, Zeddy, let's go to you.
Yeah, I can chime in. Yeah, our programs have changed quite a bit for sure. We ran programs through the summer and fall, but at really limited capacities. We, and additionally added in a number of restrictions, including wearing masks, being distanced, certain sanitizing practices. We haven't been doing temp checks, but we will be doing that going into our winter programs. Majority of our summer fall programs were completely outdoors, and so we felt like the temp checks weren't as necessary, but we do utilize some indoor space during our winter programs with transportation. So that's really going to be our biggest barrier. And then additionally, just like our activities and interactions, we typically do a lot of really engaging, experiential ed type activities that often have some level of contact or, close proximity to one another. So really adapting the types of activities that we're facilitating and getting creative with creating more activities that are a bit more individual based while still being in a group together. And then, what practices might we carry forward? That's a good one. I'm like, when are we going to get past this so we can, go back to the way that we used to do things? I think I'm going to have to think on that, or maybe as I hear other folks, I'll the things will come back to me of practices we might carry forward.
And that's okay. We also are going to have some great questions from our audience too, so no pressure on that. Let's see. Why don't you go next?
Sure. I'll just start right off the bat with a COVID challenge. Our infrared thermometers don't work in the cold weather, which I'm sure a lot of people are finding. A lot of these sort of cheapo electronics don't function in the cold. So luckily we've been able to have parents take their temperatures at home and they just verbally report it when they drop their kids off, and we log it, and it's simple. So be prepared for that, unless you have access to like a lodge or something where the thermometers will work. And maybe going back a little bit, so in the spring when our program, all the schools were closed, we went to an online format. We made videos for kids to model doing things in our backyards. But one thing that was great is on our normal program days, we did Zoom meetings, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And so in the morning, we would invite kids to go into their backyard or to go to like a green space nearby, to build a fairy house, to draw a plant, to gather seeds and glue them onto a piece of paper to make a crazy piece of art. And then having that Zoom call in the afternoon allowed those kids to share their stories, to show off the drawings they made, basically to hold them accountable a little bit and to have someone pull the experience out. And a lot of the kids didn't do it or didn't have anything to share. And that's okay too, just still supporting those kids. And because I think if you do go back to an online program, just any type of, positive interaction from an adult who is going to ask them questions and tell them funny stories from the day is super beneficial. So yeah, there's a silver lining there, I suppose.
Thanks, Ross. Matt, do you have some tips to share or ways that you've pivoted from COVID?
Yeah, interestingly enough, we haven't had to pivot too much. We fortunately received a grant from the state, so we're a hub site. I think Dr. Fauci said it's by an order of 20 that folks are safer gathering outdoors than they are indoors. Like Zeddy said, sort of masks, temperature checks, all of those protocols are super important. In terms of I think the sit spot practice, which is something that's great, whether it's going on in COVID times or not. But if you're sort of having to do something virtually, asking students to find a spot and to sit there, and go there on a regular basis throughout the seasons, and just grounds themselves physically where they are, and it also gives them a really great vantage point with which to witness the constant change that's going on in nature. And yeah, so I mean, I'm a big fan of Sit Spot. I know Crow's Path, they do that a lot there too. And they do it in North Branch too. Awesome. Yeah, in terms of how things have changed, we created the New Roots program in response to the hybrid model, because so many families, were just stressed. We realized that that the outdoors actually provides a really good, safe opportunity in these strange times for kids to gather. So, a week before the governor in the state of Vermont said we're going to the hybrid model, we brought together some of the folks that we work with in our summer camps to see if we could create a program. And to our surprise, in a week or two, we had like 90 families signing up and participating. We've since gone back to the full-time model in the state, and so we're still operating, but roughly 30 families are now involved. So I do think there's some opportunities. I mean, I think a lot of ways we environmental educators are ahead of the curve in terms of providing a really safe opportunity for young people to learn and just to stir their curiosity.
Yeah, I really agree with that too. And I think that's why we've got, so many folks that are here on this webinar today, is like, what are the secrets of being outdoors with kids? So Zach, I don't know that you've shared anything on this question. Take it away.
Yeah, spare masks are really essential. As soon as masks get wet from just moisture during breathing, kids don't want to have them on their face. So, if you're outside with kids for an extended period, making sure they've got, at least one, if not two spare masks that they can change out so that they can continue to be comfortable wearing a mask while they're outside. We organization-wide kind of came up with some COVID safe protocols, but then we went through our day and thought about times where we might need to make specific protocols. So one of those is around safe tool use, another around safe gameplay, another around safe cooking and safe eating, which I'm shared with the group. And something as simple as like goldenrod stalks make great tagging wands. Not something we ever thought of before COVID, but in sort of reimagining how we can play some of our games safely, that's a really simple adjustment to make.
And it involves identification of a plant, which is excellent. And there are so many things that you could do with that. A writing prompt, what do you notice about this? And certainly many ways to incorporate that within classroom requirements as well. So great tip, Zach. All right, so this is our last question for the panelists, and then we'll open it up to our audience Q&A, and there have been some great questions. So if you haven't done so yet, look through what's in there, upvote what is most interesting to you, and then we'll get to some of those. Unless Ashley, I see you just came on. Was there something you wanted to add?
Nope, that's great.
Okay, so what recommendations do you have for outdoor teaching tools or creating outdoor teaching spaces? And I saw that someone in the chat had asked about, they wanted to see specifics of outdoor classrooms. And so maybe in a follow-up document to folks, we could send photos if you've got them. But what are tips that you have on creating an outdoor teaching space? Let's start with Matt.
There we go. I think finding a place that is out of the wind is really important. I think finding a spot that ideally gets a bunch of sunshine. One of the mistakes I've learned is, if you have like a fire pit, but it's, around trees, the kids after a good snowstorm are going to get a little extra love from Mother Nature and get wet. So, just sort of being aware of what are the overhangs that are there. I think the great thing about nature, which I'm sure all the panelists would agree with, is that it surrounds us. And I think that, whether it's, we're fortunate to have 230 acres of land that we get to romp around in, but, even a small tract of land behind a school can be a great laboratory, just to see, how the non-human species are interacting, with us. So, I would say the big thing is finding a place that you can get out of the wind. And ideally, if you can create a fire circle, that can be really nice. I think it's not just the physical heat that it can create, but I think it forms a really nice psychological center. And one of the things dealing with high school kids, and we deal with a heterogeneous mix of kids. These are not kids that would necessarily be friends with each other, but when you're sitting around a fire together, everyone quickly becomes equals. And I think that that's one of the great gifts of being in nature, is that it promotes a way of looking at the world that expresses a certain symbiosis and mutuality versus conflict and competition.
Great, thanks. We had a lot of folks upvoting a question about limb falling and what are your wind limits, and maybe we can address it more specifically later, but thank you for touching on it, Matt. Zeddy, why don't you go next?
Great. Our outdoor spaces are quite unique, I think, with this audience. We are mostly conducting our programs at night at ski resorts. So a bit of a different environment. But some of the things that we have mentors, volunteers that come to our programs as well and are really vital to the success of our programs. And in order for them to remain engaged, ensure that they are in the know on what our curriculum goals are, etc. We have these, what we call prompt cards. So basically for any of the adults, our instructors, our mentors, that are just kind of some of those questions or are the core value that we're focusing on for that day, or some reminders for the day, so that they can have it in their pocket. It's really easily accessible. They can pull it out on the chairlift when they're with a youth, or just like a quick reference. And that has been really useful versus trying to do a big huddle of all the adults while all of the youth are, getting cold standing over here. So in terms of communication practices, that has been great. Let's see, other tools for our programs. I think I'll leave it at that, because I feel like our programs are a bit unique in relation to what everyone else is looking for.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I know we didn't get Zach and Ross to answer those questions, but we've got a captive audience that has great questions, and so I want to, if it's okay with you all, to shift gears and get some of those questions answered. Hooray! So I will pause it and take it. Ashley, take it away.
Awesome, great. Thanks so much, Lindsay, and thanks for all the panelists. And sorry for folks that got stuck in the waiting room in the beginning of our session. Hopefully everyone's in now. I'm gonna kick things off. So Celeste had a great question about photos of outdoor classrooms. And so I'm actually gonna ask the panelists to follow up with us, give us a photo of your outdoor classroom or outdoor learning spaces, and we'll send that in the follow-up email, because I think that is an awesome point, Celeste. And then the question I'm gonna kick things off with, so Wilma is asking about, for the pre-K ages, so those younger students, what's your feels like temp threshold for staying out? And Zach put a comment in there as well, but maybe other panelists have another thought. And then Pat is asking a question about that as well. Do you have a wind protocol? So threshold temps for feels like, what's the wind protocol? If there's wind gusts above a certain speed, do you leave the forest for safety? Not cold, but thinking about falling limbs. And Zach, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I will say that the state does have some guidelines. So if you're a licensed pre-K program, you'll need to be mindful of the guidance the state is giving in terms of what safe temperatures and thresholds there are. You know, but I'm a firm believer that there's really no such thing as bad weather, just bad preparation. You can go outside in any weather as long as you have the right gear. And so even in the really challenging conditions, super cold, windy, blinding snow, with our forest preschool, we set the tone that we're going out no matter what, even if it's only for 5 minutes, so that we are in the habit of going outside every day, experiencing all types of weather. And if we're dressed appropriately, we can be outside safely for some period of time. But it is a challenge, and it takes a lot of practice for teachers, for families, and for students.
Awesome. Thanks. Ross, do you have another kind of add on to that?
Yeah, just to hop in, having scouts on your staff, basically people to go out ahead of time if it's a crazy windy day to check out your outdoor classroom, to make sure there's not dead trees or snags. In our main space, we kind of tend that area regularly as well as we can, taking out trees that are a risk. And then identifying places, fields that feel safer in wind. And like Zach was saying, if it's -10 with the wind chill, we're still outside for the entire day. And we just change our plan, and we run up and down hills and go sledding all day long, and the kids have a blast in that weather.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think Carrie's got the next question queued up for us.
Yeah, just like Ashley was saying, we'll follow up with resources. We have so many great questions coming in here. I noticed there's a theme around folks looking for favorite activities or great runaround games to keep kids warm. So we'll definitely include that in our Padlet that we're going to follow up with too. So we'll try to have answers to all the questions that we didn't get to respond to live here. There's also a lot of questions about fires, so check out the Padlet for more information about that, how to get permission to have a fire, how to do that safely, because we didn't get into that too much today either. But I'm going to pull together a couple questions that were aimed at little ones, but I think this can apply to all students, about how do you keep masks on, how do you keep mittens on. We can definitely imagine this happening with our younger learners, but I think it's totally true of high schoolers as well. How do you keep people, with their gear on, and then how do you keep track of that gear, especially if you're not allowed to have a lost and found right now or have sharing of gear. So I'd love to hear some just quick tips and tricks around that.
Briefly, I can hop in on that. We've been lucky so far. Our kids are not particularly bothered by the masks. I think they recognize after the spring what a privilege it is to be out at a program that they're having fun with. And so just to explain that doing this allows us to be here. And then 2, anytime a mask comes off, a butt has to be sitting down. And it's really, they're only coming off for eating time. So we just have structured our eating time into the day in a way that was more formal than it was in the past. And so it's really simple if a kid is standing up with their mask on to just immediately say, oh, sit back down, get the mask back on. So having clear expectations and structures that keep kids from walking away from their masks helps a lot.
Great, thanks for that. Zach, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I love mitten clips, the little mitten minders that you can buy that clip to the mitten and then clip to the cuff of the jacket. I mean, those are really wonderful, because that's the really challenging thing is kids want to take the mittens off, mitten gets lost, and now you've got a really dangerous situation with a kid that is missing, has exposed skin. So those mitten minders are really great, and they're pretty easy. And that's also one of the reasons why we ask all of our participants to make sure they have a change of mittens too, in case one gets lost, or like usual, they eventually get wet and need to be swapped out.
I think Zach had mentioned earlier, always having extra masks on hand. We always have extra gloves, mittens, face masks, in a normal year. And so I think same goes, and maybe even more so this year, especially when it comes to masks. But yeah, always having kind of those extras on hand that you can lend out makes a big difference.
Yeah, and for extended programs where you might be outside all day, and you just can't have enough pairs of mittens for a whole day in the field, we just plop sticks in the ground around the fire and dry out mittens throughout the day too. That works really well.
And one crucial element of an outdoor classroom are backpack pegs. We have a lot of posts in our camp that are holding up miscellaneous things, and we've drilled tons of holes into them and stuck pegs in there. So every kid has a place to hang their backpack, and then they know where they can shove mittens and stuff into the backpack that's just waiting for them, as opposed to some things here, some things there, and some things who knows where.
Thank you all. Those are great suggestions on how we can keep track of things. Another question I'm just hoping maybe we can crowdsource real quick. Folks are looking for places that donate gear, places they could go to ask for donations for schools or for outdoor programs. So I'm asking the panelists and the audience right now, if you'd like to type into the chat any place you know that's up for donation requests, or that you've had success with, or even grants for funding to get gear for your classroom or for your program. Feel free to put those into the chat. We'll collect them all and send them out for everybody. So just doing a little crowdsourcing around where we can all get gear from to even out that access to gear. So I think we've got a couple announcements coming up next for folks. The first one here on the next slide is about a little survey. We want to continue to be responsive to people's needs, looking at what kinds of webinars you might want. So maybe Lindsay, you could flip the slides forward to that. We've got a little Google form here that we'll put in the chat. And if you want to let us know what kinds of webinar topics you are interested in for the future, we would love to start putting together some webinars for later this winter and spring. I think just a couple more flips, Lindsay. There we go. Sorry, I went out of order there. But then I'll toss it back to you, Lindsay, I think, for the Member Connect.
Great. So if you have, let me go back. If you are interested, I know we've got folks from all over today, but if those of you, especially in Vermont, are interested in joining the work that we do and learning more about the work that we do with the Vermont Education and Environment Network, we are a state affiliate of NAAEE, the North American Alliance of Environmental Education, or may have butchered that. But if you are within the state and eager and interested to learn about the work that we do, both either as a school educator or an environmental educator, and would like to just see what we're up to, we have a Member Connect event Wednesday, December 16th, where you can learn more about our mission and upcoming events and all of that. So we'll share a link in the chat, and you can also find out about it on our website as well. And mini grants, is that you, Ashley?
That is me. All right, so for teachers that are joining us from the Lake Champlain Basin, so in Vermont, New York, and Quebec, there is a grant opportunity that is incredibly easy to apply for. I believe it is a paragraph that needs to be submitted. So for folks that are thinking about how they can get some gear for their outdoor classroom, the eligibility is any K-12 teacher in the Lake Champlain Basin. You can apply for amounts up to $1,000. And the grant is really geared towards providing materials that'll aid in teaching outside about watershed issues. So this could be things like waders or monitoring equipment or backpacks. You could probably get pretty creative in this and also ask for kind of some outdoor gear in this if you can make a great case for it. And so those applications are pretty short. They're being accepted on a rolling basis. We're going to put the link in the chat for that. And it is a first come, first serve kind of deal. So they'll be reviewed as they come in so that we can get them out. And I think pre-K and toddlers, question coming in, I think you can probably apply for these. I think that would definitely be okay.
Great, and another thing coming up in the chat box here for you is a registration link if you would like to learn more from NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education, and the New England Environmental Education Association are putting on a webinar next month entitled The Practitioner's Guide to Assessing Connection to Nature. And this is coming from an NAAEE study and tool that they created recently to help practitioners that work in the outdoors assess connection to nature with their participants. So if you'd like to learn more about this, it's December 9th at 2 p.m. and there is a link in the chat box to learn more.
We have so many links coming at you in the chat box right now. It is not even funny. And yes, correction on what I called NAAEE. Oops, about that. Our upcoming webinar that we are hosting, the Vermont Education and Environment Network is hosting, is in January, Place-Based Teaching on a Budget. So we really would love to see so many of you here who had great questions about outdoor education and how to incorporate that into your classroom curriculum. We will have classroom educators that are doing this very thing. We will have outdoor educators who are doing this very thing. So a really neat audience that gets at both of those, both outdoor education and classroom education that are going to be talking about this. So whether you have some budget, little budget, or no budget, we've got tips and tricks for you. And we hope that you'll join us. So the link is coming at you in the chat, and that is January 14th at 4 o'clock. So we hope you will join us. Oh, there's a slide about it as well. Excellent. And then in February, Gardens as an Outdoor Classroom will be our February webinar. As a reminder, these are free webinars, and we hope that these are the resources that you need. And just like Ashley and Carrie pointed out earlier, we do have a Google survey. We would love to hear the topics that you're most interested in professional development around, and how we can connect educators and informal educators to getting you the information that would help you better run programs. So be sure to fill out that Google form and let us know what you need. And that's what we base these webinars on. There is a link in the chat, I believe, also for that webinar. But if you missed any of those, you can always find our website, probably also linked in the chat, and find us across social media. And if you joined us today, then you'll be receiving an email reminder about all of these upcoming events as well. Carrie, Ashley, what else?
Yeah, so great question in the chat box coming in about PD certificates. If you'd like a PD certificate, we can definitely do that. Put your name in the chat, put PD certificate next to it, and we will reach out when we have that. I know we threw a lot of information at you. There's a lot of events coming up, but don't worry, we're going to send you a link with all of that. And there are amazing questions still in the chat box. We are going to get together with our awesome panelists and get some cool responses and some photos for you. We will follow up with that as well. And again, please fill out that survey. Let us know what is relevant and what you'd like us to chat about at our next field webinars. We are so grateful to have had so many folks here from all different regions. And so just know if your question didn't get answered, we will make sure it is at least answered in a follow-up on Padlet. Carrie, anything you want to add?
Just another thank you, shout out to all of our presenters and all of you in the audience. We couldn't have done this without all the social media shares. So thank you to everybody who was reposting for us and helping to spread the word. We've got a wonderful dynamic community of educators going on, not just in Vermont, but around the world. So it'd be fantastic if we all kept doing that. We all kept amplifying each other's work. That would be great. So we'll look forward to sharing your posts and hope you will do the same for us in the future so we can continue to work and learn together.
Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks for coming, folks. We are going to see you next month.